Jacob from Theatrical Gems here, and I'd like to welcome you to our first virtual play, Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. Before we begin, I just have a few things that I would like to say. First off, this is a very hard time for everyone in the theater, for producers like myself, for actors, directors, and for audience members. So much of what makes this art form special is being together. And that's very difficult to do right now with social distancing and other guidelines in place. However, this virtual performance is a way to sort of get the feeling of live theater. It's going to feel different, but hopefully it's going to feel similar as well. This is the first of 4 virtual performances this summer. And we're going to be doing these every other Saturday. So in 2 weeks, on July 11th, you're going to be seeing 30 Minutes or Less by Jonathan G. Galvez. On July 25th is Aaron Papalardo's Down to the Wire. And on August 8th is As You Wish It or The Bride Princess by Michael Higgins, a Shakespearean parody of the classic film The Princess Bride. You may have noticed that we did not ask you to pay for a ticket for tonight's show. Instead, during each of these 4 summer virtual plays, we will be highlighting a local charity that could use your help, either in terms of donations or volunteer work, or that could help you during this difficult time. Tonight's organization is CAME, C-A-M-E, which is the local food bank here for Barrett, Paradise, and Price Townships in the Pocono Mountains. But everything that we say about CAME is true for food banks all across this country during this time. That they all need your help, so please, if you are not local, please consider helping out one of your local food banks, which we talk about as well. We're going to be talking more about CAME and to the director of CAME during our intermission. The Importance of Being Earnest is a 3-act play, but don't worry, it moves pretty quickly, and the 2 intermissions that take place are both under 2 minutes, so be ready to catch right back up. Don't go too far. We can't wait to hear your thoughts on this, and we hope to continue providing different forms of entertainment during this time. We can't wait to see you guys back in the theater, but until then, it's our hope to keep entertaining you. So thank you so much. Enjoy the show, and if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, jacob@theatricalgems.org. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
Did you hear what I was saying, Lane?
I didn't think it was polite to listen, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play full expression.
Yes, sir.
Have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Sherman and Mr. Worthing were dining with us, that 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed?
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of the first-rate brand.
Oh, good heavens. Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had a very little experience of it myself up until the present, sir. I've only been married once, and that was a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is a very not interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Oh, how are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
Well, I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. And where have you been since Thursday?
In the country.
And what on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people that you amuse?
Oh, neighbors. Neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
Oh, how immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire. Yes, of course. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Oh, yes, that is all very well, but I am afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
Oh, please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
This is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some of the bread and butter? The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth would you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there is no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription on the inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine! You have seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I want my cigarette case.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming lady she is, too. Lives in Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. For heaven's sake, give me my cigarette case back.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. But there's no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call herself, or her own nephew, her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Earnest. You answer to the name of Earnest. You look as if your name is Earnest. You are most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life, and it is perfectly absurd you're saying now that your name isn't Earnest.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come on, boy, tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
Oh, I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray make it probable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle for motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Oh, and where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that it is not a place in Shropshire.
Well, I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Oh, now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear boy, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Ernest, who gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the truth, pure and simple.
What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist, and you are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may go down to the country whenever I would like. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight. For I have really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had better much dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. I dined there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough for one to dine with one's own relations. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all! If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So, I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you do the same with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense! If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Well, then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none. That must be Aunt Augusta. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want so.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
Oh, I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two rarely go together.
Oh, dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we were a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Hawberry. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Oh, certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Oh, good heavens, Lane. What are the new no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Hawberry, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say.
I'm
Thank
afraid,
you.
Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore and, I need hardly say, a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Mr. Bunbury's a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it's high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shamming with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury for me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run out of the program I've drawn out with you, if you will kindly come into the next room with me.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact. And for me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then? Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't care much about the name of Earnest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I must say that I think there are lots of other nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack. No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, have been more than usually plain. And I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen!
Yes, Mr. Worthing. What have you got to say to me?
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling.
My darling, I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finish what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you become engaged to someone, I or your father will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making those inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen. Gwendolen, the carriage!
Yes, Mamma.
Mr. Worthing, I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on the list of eligible bachelors. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear that. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been under the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear that. I do not approve of anything that tampers with the natural ignorance. Natural ignorance is like a delicate, exotic flower. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper class and probably lead to acts of violence in Courthouse Square. What is your income?
Between 7 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
Investments chiefly. I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly expect to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham.
Lady Bloxham? I do not know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
Both? To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
I am afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It will be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had the first-class ticket find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes.
Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railroad station, which might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, has probably indeed been used for that purpose. But it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
May I ask you what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try to acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Miss Bracknell.
Me? Sir, what has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and to form an alliance with a parcel. Goodbye, Mr. Worthing.
Goodbye. For goodness sake, Algie, don't sing that ghastly tune! How idiotic are you?
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolen refused you? I know it is the way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, as far as Gwendolen is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster, without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algie. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations be abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people and who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
You don't think there is any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy, and no man does. That's his. By the way, did you tell Gwendolen about your Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl.
What about your brother? What about Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I should have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's a sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. She's excessively pretty, and she is only just 18.
And have you told Gwendolen yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolen are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they have called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get on a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address I have, but what is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My darling.
How long do you remain in town?
Until Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I'll probably not be back till Monday. You can put my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Well, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that's all.
If you don't take care, your poor friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Well, I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that's nonsense! Algie, you never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Hi, I'm Becky Leister. I'm the director for CAME Food Pantry. For those of you that don't know, CAME stands for Christian Awareness Ministries Ecumenical. And that pretty much means all good people in Barrett, Price, and Paradise who love and care about their neighbors, look out for them. So if you want to donate to CAME, and then we in turn help those in need in our community, that would be wonderful. Checks can be sent to CAME, C-A-M-E, and our address is CAME, C-A-M-E, at P.O. Box 434, Canadensis, PA 18325. You can become a client here at our pantry based on the same financial guidelines as food stamps, and you can sign up and become a regular client and come see us every month. Or with our COVID rules, if you just need food, please come see us. You can be an emergency client and just get food that day, and if you don't need us again, fine. But if you do need us, we're here to help. All pantries need help right now with the increase in need, and if you would like to donate to a pantry in your area, simply Google food pantry in my county, and you will probably come up with plenty. But all pantries need help right now, and I'm sure they would appreciate your help and support.
Cecily, Cecily, your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so completely young as he is. I know no one has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce an effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget about all of them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript unfortunately was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I am afraid. I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. Oh, I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at Evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
What's this, Merriman? Uncle Jack's brother! Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was very anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him?
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened, and I'm so afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does!
Oh, you are my little cousin Cecily, aren't you?
You are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and really being good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course I have been rather reckless.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I've been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that. Though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
Oh, well, it is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That's a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you had better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. Uncle is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, this world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily?
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That's because I'm hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Oh, thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any type or appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
Americal Neil?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Well, then Miss Prism isn't as a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I've ever seen.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They're a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often, I've been told, not even to her. Mr. Worthing!
This is indeed a surprise. We did not intend for you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Earnest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Oh, Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you are always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Earnest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager at the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seemed to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I feel that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to the tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festal days.
That reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you're interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
The fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything of it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Well, not at all. The sprinkling, and indeed the immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I think, advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seems to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm pleased to see you back. What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you had a toothache. And I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother Earnest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
Oh, Brother John!
Good heavens!
I've come down from town to tell you that I'm very sorry for all the trouble I've caused you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be much good in one who's kind to an invalid.
Oh, he has been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he has told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury! Well, I won't have to talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say that I think that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is my first time here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
You young scoundrel, Algie. You must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I have put Mr. Earnest's luggage in your room next to yours, sir. I suppose that's all right.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I've not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have. Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You're not to talk to Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who's actually staying with you for a whole week in your house as a guest.
You're certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you as long as you're in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me.
But will you go if I change my clothes?
Oh, yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town. This bun-burying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that's everything. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I thought you were Uncle Jack.
Oh, he's gone to order the dog cart for me. He's gonna send me away.
Then we have to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes?
Yes, miss.
Oh, I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks in my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Oh, tell it to come around next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Of course! Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months? But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter, one way or the other, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name, and this is the little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Oh, did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. And this box, is where I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I'd broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all, Cecily. I am very much hurt indeed to hear you broke it off. But why particularly when the weather was so charming?
It would have hardly been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy.
Oh, you'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily?
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name. You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. There's something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
But, my dear child, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name? Like Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
My own dear, sweet, loving Cecily, darling. I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is rather an aristocratic name. Half of the chaps who run in a bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, you couldn't love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once, on the most important christening. I mean, on most important business. I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th, and that I only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Miss Gwendolen Fairfax has called to see Mr. Worthing on a very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea?
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax! Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are always right.
How nice of you to like me so much after we have known each other such a comparatively short time.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother. Nor, in fact, any relations. My dear guardian, Mr. Worthing, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Oh, it is strange. Mr. Worthing never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you, but I am bound to state that now I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I can't help expressing a wish that you, well, were just a little bit older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly.
Oh, pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature, but even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. History supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I'm growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel anywhere without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily. If it is any disappointment to you, then I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners.
Shall I leave the tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you.
Oh, sugar?
No, sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays. You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Oh, my own Ernest.
Oh, Gwendolen, darling.
A moment. May I ask you if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present around your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh.
Here is Ernest.
Oh, my own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Oh, good heavens, Gwendolen?
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen! I mean, to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrieff.
Algernon. Moncrieff. Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked, but my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolen. No.
Mr. Worthing, there's just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
Algie, this ghastly state of things is what you call burying, I suppose?
You are a perfectly wonderful Bunbury, it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to Bunbury here. Only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite explosive. You won't be able to run down the country quite so often as you used to do, dear Algie. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother's a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing, either.
As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I must say that you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all. I love her.
Well, I simply want to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of you marrying Miss Cardew.
Oh, I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
How can you sit there calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get all in my cuffs. But one should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in a really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I'm unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, there is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Oh, good heavens! I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That's a very different thing.
Oh, that may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It's absurd. I never go anywhere without my dinner. No one ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened as 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is an important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it is rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. I might make you very well unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by some severe chill.
Oh, that is nonsense! You're always talking nonsense!
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake! Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet, and there's still a muffin left.
The fact that they did not follow me at once into the house as anyone else would have done seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They've been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't a cough.
Oh, they're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly, it is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one?
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrieff, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory answer, does it not?
Yes, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the important thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as you liked?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts on the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the time for German skepticism. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrieff said. His voice alone inspires absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no!
True. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one. Your Christian names are an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we're going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me? Are you ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
Darling.
Oh, darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any sign is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of the sudden flight of my daughter by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by a luggage train. You will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And as for Algernon? Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
Is this the house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That's what I mean. So, Bunbury died.
He seems to have had a great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we've gotten finally rid of Mr. Bunbury, may I ask Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is holding in what seems to me a particularly unnecessary manner?
That lady is my ward, Miss Cecily Cardew.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrieff and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything particularly exciting in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seem to me considerably above the proper average. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railroad stations in London? I merely asked and desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea there were any families or persons whose origin were a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of Belgrave Square, Surrey, and the Sporran.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
So far, I'm satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incidents. I see, though, perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about 130,000 pounds in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. 130,000 pounds. And in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any real solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, dear. Oh, pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it, but we can soon alter that after all. Kindly turn around, sweet child. No, the side. Oh, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Oh, Cecily's just the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world. And I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who cannot get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on, but I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon. To speak frankly, I am not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity about finding out about each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's legal guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously, eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is that I do not approve of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly aware that I don't have a brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You're perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. And so I don't think your guardian consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray, excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again. But it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is filled of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes. I felt it instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting. Even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Well, then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrieff.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she's 35, a remark which I am bound to me seems to be somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear. We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christenings? Sir, is that not somewhat presumptuous?
Well, both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? That idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses.
Am I to understand that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be as much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I am on my way to join her.
Pray, allow me a moment to detain you. This matter may prove to be of vital importance. Is this Miss Prism, a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
Oh, she is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am celibate, madam.
In spite of what I hear of her being Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
Oh, she approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Baywater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than unusual revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded in my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that families of high positions, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered a thing.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine, yes. Here is the injury it received through the upsetting of an omnibus in younger and happier days. Here is the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage. Oh, Oh, and here on the lock are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had taken them and gotten it placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience to be without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes. Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that this is a serious blow, but after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrieff, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel. You will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however, though. I was out of practice.
My own? What own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens. I had quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
Then the question at hand better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury had not been spared for you. Of course, at the time that you were christened, of course, by the time you were taken, you were christened.
Well, then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given?
Obviously, being the elder son, you were named after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I'm sure the general had one. I can't seem to recall, but I know he had one.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
Well, of course, the general served at a time of peace, except in his domestic life, he would appear in the army directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. Oh. M generals, Malum, Maxbaum, Magley, what ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, McKenzie, Moncrieff, Lieutenant 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, General 1869, Christian names, Earnest, John. I always told you, Gwendolen, my name was Earnest, didn't I? Well, it is Earnest after all. I mean, it naturally is Earnest.
Yes, I remember that the general was called Earnest. I knew I had a particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolen, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
Darling.
Letitia. Frederick, at last.
Cecily, at the last.
Gwendolen, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.